Joining us in the studio is Professor Alan Knight. Alan is a leading expert on environment and sustainability, is a UK Government Sustainability Commissioner and advises many companies on their environmental policy, including Virgin. Alan, thanks very much indeed. The last time that we met was at actually a WPP store conference, where you gave a keynote address. Of course, the world has sort of changed quite a lot since then. The world economic sort of crisis has been the single biggest topic of conversation. Where has the sustainability and environmental debate gone over that period? And are companies, retailers more or less involved in the whole sustainability debate given what's going on with the global economy?
I think the first thing is that those companies which have already invested in their sustainability CSR program certainly haven't regretted it. You know, there's airlines out there who have got very old dirty planes and their costs are really high. And there's also airlines out there who invested in new planes and are really enjoying the benefits of that extra efficiencies. So those companies which have done it already are saying, thank goodness we've done it already, because it's making survive the recession a lot easier. At an intellectual level, I think it's particularly powerful what the recession is doing, because what the recession showed us is how fragile the global economy is, how quickly systems can collapse, and how dangerous investing purely in the short term is, and how we have to think longer term and have to plan for resilience. All of that parallels how we look after the natural environment. You know, we are stripping the world's tropical rainforests as if they're a resource to be mined, just at the same time as the science is saying the tropical rainforests are vital to stabilise the climate, exactly at the same time as Nicholas Stern has said climate change will be an economic disaster. And so the debate intellectually has got to a really interesting place, that people are connecting fragile economics with fragile ecology, and the need to look after both will change the way we run our economy in the future.
But at a time when people are focusing on their corporate survival, to what extent has nice to haves, and maybe people think environmental policies and CSR policies are nice to haves, taken a backseat as the focus is on about improving margins, improving profitability, in order to get through the current situation?
I think if people think that sustainability is a nice to have, they don't get it, and they won't survive anyway. I mean, it's very interesting to see the high profile companies, particularly in retail, who didn't survive the recession, i.e. do not exist anymore. None of them had a particularly good reputation on sustainability or CSR. And it's because they were so preoccupied with the short term, they missed the longer term trends. Whereas those retailers which had good investments and had already embedded their sustainability program might not be enjoying the recession, they might see less money in the till, but they're not facing down the lens of redundancy and bankruptcy. They're just, sales are down, but we'll get through it. The other thing about sustainability is it's about using less packaging. It's about using less energy and getting more from less packaging and more energy. And that has to be good economics as well. So if you get it, you might spend less on a little project or something because cash is short term, but the ethos of sustainability should be helping you survive the recession.
So are we seeing, in a sense, a maturity of the debate and the actions taking place, which is let's do actions around sustainability that are both good for the environment and also both good for the organisation? In a sense, that's got to be the best of both worlds.
I think the phrase good CSR, good sustainability is good for the bottom line has been used by people like me for the last 20 years, and it's almost become a bit of a cliche, a bit of an urban myth. What the recession has actually done has proven it. For the first time, we've got real material evidence that those companies which really get sustainability are finding the recession easier to manage than those who don't get it at all. And that will just carry on in the long term.
And talking about the long term in a sense, we're now moving on the fast glide path up to the new Copenhagen talks. In the 1990s we had Kyoto. I think in an environment where we weren't so concerned with the financial issues, we would have had much more talk and PR and debate about Copenhagen. But it's coming up very quickly. All the world leaders will be there. There'll be a completely fresh approach from the Obama administration and the Americans. What, from your perspective, do you see some of the issues being? And maybe probably the best place to start is, has the science of climate change significantly from the 1990s in Kyoto to the background that's going to be discussed in Copenhagen?
The science has really helped galvanise action thinking, because the more science which is coming out, the clearer the consensus is that climate change is happening, that climate change is being accelerated by man's activities, i.e. the burning of fossil fuels. And this new phrase which you hear a lot of if you spend your life going to these types of conferences, which is sort of non-linear change or tipping points, you know, the point of no return, where rather than just a slow, gradual rise in the temperature, things will happen very spectacularly. You know, when a huge lump of ice breaks from the Arctic and melts straight away, things just change overnight, and that's really scaring people. The other area where the science has provided a real wake-up call is natural systems. You know, we've already talked about rainforests. 20% of the world's carbon emissions comes from the conversion of rainforests into palm oil plantations and slash and burn. I.e. it's almost the biggest source of carbon there is out there, and we need rainforests for other benefits. There's new science which is actually probably going to show that the carbon in soil, and we as a world aren't looking after soil very well either, has an even bigger carbon potential than rainforests. So it's not all about burning fossil fuels anymore. So the science is changing rapidly, more urgency and more consensus, which is making a more positive, ambitious outcome of Copenhagen more likely.
So what implications does that have for the debate in Copenhagen? Presumably it's going to be less about if these things are going to happen, it's going to be about if we don't do something about it, they will happen. And therefore, what are we likely to see come out of Copenhagen in terms of resolutions or agreements that will impact both us as consumers and also as retailers?
I think we will have ambitious targets. You know, some people have got on the table as high as 80% carbon reductions by 2050, and that's against sort of baselines of around 2000, year 2000. So these are massive changes. That's a fundamental change in the way we produce our energy and the way we live our lives, basically. And 5 years ago, that would have just been seen as dark green nonsense. Now it's actually in the negotiating document, a target as high as 80%, which is huge. There's a lot of complexity in Copenhagen, and you know, the actual document's 350 pages, it's literally that thick. But it all boils down to, we will make high carbon energy and high carbon products uncompetitive by putting a cost on that pollution, which we still get for free. So if you're in a high carbon industry and there is an alternative way of getting that service, which is cheaper because it produces less carbon, you are vulnerable. If you are a high carbon player in a sector where there's lower carbon players, and the airline is a really good example where the differentiation is quite straightforward, you will be made through public policy to be uncompetitive. So the idea of Copenhagen is to make high carbon players uncompetitive and squeezing out the marketplace. It's that brutal. It's using public policy to create a low carbon economy.
And if you translate that to the other end of the scale, away from public policy to what happens in terms of your private usage and consumption, what impact will that have to me as an individual?
Well, at one level, the good news is, if it's about how your electricity is generated, not much. You still plug things into your wall. Instead of being a high carbon electricity, you're going to have low carbon electricity because we're plugged into wind farms, wind turbines, and for some, nuclear. The car you drive to work might have new technology under the bonnet. It won't affect the fact that you use your car, but it will have a lot lower carbon footprint. There'll be other aspects where you will have to challenge your lifestyle. What people are beginning to realise is that living a healthier lifestyle through passive exercise, controlling your weight, and the food you eat has a profound difference. You might have heard these campaigns about don't eat meat on Monday. And that sounds a bit sort of vegan, a bit extreme. But the carbon footprint of meat, particularly beef, is very, very, very high. So they're not saying don't eat meat at all, just eat a little bit less. And actually that's also good for your health as well. So what's the problem? So there will be changes, but I think it's the ambition for many that we're not talking about going back to the dark ages. There'll be subtle changes, be some things you don't do anymore in preference to other things, but a lot of things will just be choices you've had in the past will be edited out. You still have electricity, you still have your car. But we need, if we really are going to achieve that, we need lots of innovation supported by public policy to make TV sets and light bulbs and cars ultra low carbon. Because at the moment, it's still cheaper to buy an old-fashioned dirty car. Hence the importance of Copenhagen to make it more expensive.
What do you see being the lasting legacy of Copenhagen?
The lasting legacy of Copenhagen will be the first time the world leaders have gathered and agreed to solve a major threat facing the planet. The biggest sticking point with Copenhagen at the moment is twofold. One is the actual level of ambition. Will we really be 80% or will it get diluted down to 40%? But the other really fair and legitimate problem are people like Africa and China saying, hang on guys, we still don't have a developed Western economy. You know, we still want to make poverty history. And making poverty history will mean us having more stuff. You know, people aren't starving anymore. They're eating food, and eating that food will have a higher carbon footprint. So how do we balance the need to address poverty and at the same time reduce carbon will be done by the world leaders working together and negotiating a solution which works for all. One of the things which I, who focuses on all environmental and sustainability issues, sometimes get a bit concerned about is people think climate change is the only problem facing the planet. There are other major problems facing the planet. The destruction of the world's rainforest isn't a problem for Brazil, it's a problem for the world. Water is a precious resource. We're running out of water. So if we get it right, and if we get the politics and the chemistry right, the world leaders can gather and actually agree something which matters to all of us, it should be easier to solve all these other world problems which are going to come. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got a series of world problems we have to resolve. Climate change, Copenhagen will show that we can do it and how to do it.
And to what extent has the change in the administration in the States impacted the current negotiations of Copenhagen and what's likely to come out? Is there a sea change going on there, or is it a subtle shift?
I would say that when we're both 90, sitting on our rocking chairs, reading the book on the history of climate change and how the world pulled it off, I think the change of administration will be seen as probably the single most important dynamic which made Copenhagen possible.
Well, it won't be too long before we'll find out what happens at Copenhagen, and it will be a long time till we're on our rocking chairs. Alan Knight, UK Sustainability Commissioner, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.